My girlfriend stole $20,000 to run away with her ex to the Maldives, but when I left them stranded broke in the middle of the ocean. They begged for help and never saw coming what I did next. I'm 27 years old. I work in corporate finance. And like a year and a half ago, I discovered that the previous 2 years of my life were basically an elaborate lie designed to make me someone's plan B while that person tried to get back with her ex. And I'm not talking about a small lie. I'm talking about expert-level manipulation, theft of money, and a romantic getaway to the Maldives financed with my money. Yeah, you read that right. But let me start from the beginning, because this story is crazy from start to finish. It all started like 3 years ago at Adrian's housewarming party, a college friend who had finally bought his first apartment. I didn't want to go. Honestly, I'd had a horrible week at work and just wanted to stay home watching Netflix. But Adrian insisted so much that I finally gave in. I arrived late, like 9:30 at night, and the party was already in full swing. Loud music, people everywhere. You know how those things are. I was looking for Adrian to say hi, when suddenly I felt something cold on my foot and looked down to see a red liquid spreading across my favorite shoes, some white Nike Air Max that I'd literally bought 2 weeks before. I looked up, and there was Veronica, with an empty glass in her hand and an expression of absolute horror on her face. She was 24 years old, dark brown hair to her shoulders, green eyes, and wearing a simple but elegant black dress. The first thing she said was, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And she started frantically looking for napkins while I tried to process what had just happened. We ended up in the bathroom, cleaning my shoes while she apologized like 1,000 times. And, I don't know, there was something about the way she looked, genuinely mortified, that I found endearing. She told me she worked in marketing for a tech company, that she also knew Adrian from college but from a different study group, and that she normally wasn't this clumsy but had had a stressful day at work. One thing led to another. We kept talking after cleaning the shoes, and I ended up staying at that party until 2 in the morning just talking with her. We started dating officially like 2 weeks later. At first everything was perfect, you know, that honeymoon phase where everything is exciting and new. Veronica was fun, smart, we had the same taste in movies and music, and she seemed really interested in my life and work. Like 3 months into the relationship, she started telling me about her ex-boyfriend Maxwell. According to her, they'd been together for 3 years, and the relationship had been a toxic disaster from start to finish. She told me Maxwell was a tattoo artist, the typical bad boy type that all girls make the mistake of dating when they're young, that he'd cheated on her multiple times, that he was emotionally abusive, that he basically left her with severe trust issues. I, like the idiot I was, felt like the knight in shining armor who was finally showing her what a healthy relationship was. How ironic, right? During the first year, everything continued to be apparently perfect. I met her family, she met mine. We spent almost every weekend together, and we started talking about the future. It was her who suggested we open a joint savings account for our future travels. We had this plan to do a big trip through Europe, like a month and a half touring Italy, France, Spain, Greece, all those places you see on Instagram and think someday. I was earning well at that moment. I'd received a considerable raise, and the idea of saving together for something so important seemed like a natural step in the relationship. We opened the account at a local bank. We both signed all the papers and started depositing money regularly. I put in like $800 a month, she put in $400, and in a matter of a year and a half we'd accumulated almost $22,000. It was a good amount, enough for the trip of our dreams with some margin. During all this time, Veronica kept mentioning Maxwell occasionally, always in the context of how horrible that relationship had been and how grateful she was to have left it behind. She told me that sometimes she saw him at social events because they had mutual friends, but that she completely ignored him. She even introduced me to Andrea, her best friend since high school, who supposedly had supported her through the whole nightmare with Maxwell. Andrea seemed nice. A bit reserved, maybe, but I thought that was just her personality. Looking back, I should have noticed some weird signs, like the fact that Veronica always had her phone face down, or that sometimes she'd disappear for hours saying she was working on important projects, or that occasionally she'd cancel plans last minute for work emergencies. But I trusted her completely, you know? I had no reason to doubt. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning like a year and a half ago. It was a normal day. We woke up together at my apartment, had breakfast, she got ready to go to work, gave me a kiss and said, "I love you. See you tonight." Nothing out of the ordinary. I went to the office, had a busy day with meetings and reports, and like at 6 in the evening, I sent her a message asking what she wanted for dinner. No response. I sent her another message. An hour later, nothing. I called her. Went straight to voicemail. I started to worry, thinking maybe she'd had an accident or something, but I also didn't want to be the overprotective boyfriend who freaks out over a few hours without response. I waited until 10 at night, and when I still hadn't heard anything from her, I called Andrea. Andrea sounded genuinely surprised when I asked her if she knew where Veronica was. She told me she had no idea, that she hadn't talked to her all day, and that was weird because they normally texted constantly. I tried not to panic. I called the local hospital. There was no record of her. I called her work the next day, and they told me Veronica had requested indefinite leave for personal reasons, and they'd approved her request. Indefinite leave. Personal reasons. Without telling me anything. Without a call, a message, nothing. I spent 3 days completely lost, not sleeping well, imagining all kinds of horrible scenarios until I decided to check our joint savings account. My stomach dropped to the floor when I saw the balance. There was $3,200 left. Of the $22,000 we'd saved, almost $19,000 was missing. There were 3 large withdrawals, all made in the last 4 days, all authorized with Veronica's signature. The last withdrawal had been literally hours before she disappeared. I called the bank immediately, spoke with a manager, explained the situation, and they told me that since it was a joint account, either of us had the legal right to withdraw the money. There was nothing they could do. I felt sick, literally, physically sick. I couldn't process what was happening. Had my girlfriend of 2 years just stolen almost $20,000 from me and disappeared? I hired a private investigator. Sounds dramatic, I know, but I was desperate and furious and needed answers. The guy was good, seriously, the type who finds whatever if you pay them enough. It cost me like $2,500, but it was worth every cent. In less than a week, I had complete information. Veronica was in the Maldives, specifically at a luxury resort called Villa Private Island, one of those places where a night costs like $2,000 minimum. And she wasn't alone. She was registered in a suite together with a Mr. Maxwell Walker. Yeah, Maxwell, her supposed toxic ex-boyfriend she'd escaped from. The investigator sent me photos. There they were, drinking cocktails on the beach, swimming in the ocean, having dinner under the stars, using my money. My fucking money. I called the resort. It took me like 30 minutes to convince the manager to transfer me to someone in administration who could help me. I had to explain the whole situation like 3 times, but I finally managed to speak with a supervisor. I explained that my name was on the credit card they were using for additional charges at the resort, that the person who was there had stolen that money, and that I needed to freeze any future charges. The supervisor was incredibly professional, told me she understood the situation and was going to review the records. She called me back 2 hours later, confirming that indeed, all the resort charges were being billed to a credit card in my name that I didn't even know existed. Veronica had requested an additional card on my account without my knowledge using documents from our joint account. The supervisor told me she was going to block all future charges and was going to inform the couple that they needed to provide another form of payment. But I didn't stop there. I was in full revenge mode, and rightfully so, I think. I called every service company we shared. Netflix, Spotify, HBO, the gym, the car insurance I paid for, her car, everything. I canceled every subscription, removed my name from every account, withdrew every cent I'd put into anything we shared. I closed the joint savings account and transferred what was left to my personal account. I changed the locks on my apartment because she had a copy of the keys. I blocked her number on my phone. I deleted her from all my social media. I basically erased her existence from my life in 4 days. A week after doing all this, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Andrea. She sounded nervous, like she was about to cry, and told me she needed to talk to me in person, that she had information I needed to know. We met at a cafe near my office, and that's when my world finished falling apart. Andrea told me everything. Turns out Veronica had never stopped loving Maxwell. Never. Our entire relationship, from day one, had been an orchestrated lie. Veronica and Maxwell had broken up because he'd cheated on her with another girl, and she, hurt and furious, had decided to make him suffer. Her plan was to get a new boyfriend, someone stable and successful, and make Maxwell believe she'd moved on and was happy. The goal was for Maxwell to get jealous and want her back. And I, Patrick, the financially stable idiot with a good job, had been the perfect boyfriend for that plan. Andrea explained that Veronica had used her to spy on Maxwell during our entire relationship, that she'd ask for information about what Maxwell was doing, who he was going out with, what he said about her. Andrea admitted that at first she thought it was harmless, that Veronica just needed to close that chapter, but that over time she realized Veronica was obsessed and was using me. She showed me screenshots of conversations between them, where Veronica literally said things like, "Patrick is so predictable, he's perfect for this," or "I think Maxwell is finally starting to miss me." Andrea told me that, "I just want you to know, I never agreed with this." I sat there, processing this information for what felt like an eternity. 2 years of my life had been a complete farce. Every "I love you," every future plan, every intimate moment, everything had been acted. Andrea told me that Veronica had reconnected with Maxwell like 6 months before disappearing, that they'd started seeing each other secretly, that he'd finally told her he missed her and wanted to try again, and that Veronica had started planning her big romantic escape. The plan was to use my money to finance an incredible trip with Maxwell to the Maldives, prove to him she was willing to do anything for him, and then come back and break up with me with some made-up excuse. Simple, right? Except I ruined her perfect plan by cutting off all the money. The next 2 months were weird. I didn't hear anything from Veronica. Nothing from Maxwell, nothing. I went on with my life, went back to therapy because I clearly needed to process all this, focused on my work, spent time with friends and family. Andrea kept me informed occasionally, told me that Veronica had sent her some desperate messages from the Maldives, complaining that her cards were being rejected but without admitting what she'd done. I, honestly, hoped to never hear from her again. But then, 67 days after she disappeared, Veronica showed up at my apartment door. She looked terrible. Disheveled hair, deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes. She started apologizing before I could even say anything. "Patrick, I'm so sorry. I made a horrible mistake. I was confused. Maxwell manipulated me. Please let me explain." I just looked at her without saying anything for a moment, and when I finally spoke, my voice sounded calmer than I felt. I told her, "Veronica, there's nothing to explain. You stole almost $20,000 from me. You lied to me for 2 years, and you went to the Maldives with your ex using my money. I think that explains everything." She tried to argue, said she was going to pay me back the money, that she'd never really stopped loving me, that Maxwell had convinced her to do this. Pure lies, obviously. I asked her what had happened in the Maldives. Turns out when the resort blocked all charges and asked them for another form of payment, Maxwell panicked because he didn't have enough money either. They tried to pay with Veronica's credit cards, but they were all maxed out because she'd spent like crazy the first few weeks. The resort informed them they couldn't leave the place until they settled the pending debt, which was approximately $15,000 additional dollars in meals, drinks, spa, and activities. They were basically trapped there for over a month while they tried to get the money. Maxwell ended up calling his family and borrowing. Veronica had to sell some of her things. It was a whole disaster. And to make things worse, Maxwell started blaming her for everything, saying she'd promised him she had enough money that he would never have agreed to go if he'd known they were going to get trapped. By the time they could finally pay and leave, Maxwell hated her and barely spoke to her on the flight back. I told Veronica to leave and never come back. She cried, begged me, but I closed the door in her face, and that was the last time I saw her in person for months. I thought everything was finally over, but Veronica had one last desperate move. Like 2 weeks after our confrontation, she started posting on social media that I'd been abusive to her during our relationship, that I'd financially controlled her, that I'd isolated her from her friends and family, basically inventing a completely false narrative where she was the victim. Some people who didn't know me well started believing her. I started receiving messages from people asking if it was true, some even accusing me directly. I felt powerless, furious, betrayed again, but in a different way. It was Andrea who saved my reputation. She posted screenshots of all the conversations she'd had with Veronica during the 2 years, where Veronica openly admitted she was using me, that she was planning to steal the money, that she'd never really loved me. Andrea included messages where Veronica literally said things like, "I need Patrick to deposit more money this month. I want to have enough for a full month in the Maldives with Maxwell," or "Patrick asked me about Maxwell again today. I told him the usual story about how toxic he was. He believes it completely." Andrea's posts went viral in our social circle. Suddenly, everyone knew the complete truth. Veronica tried to delete her false accusations, but the damage to her own reputation was already done. The consequences for Veronica were severe. She lost her job in marketing because someone from her company saw all the drama on social media and decided they didn't want that kind of negative publicity associated with their company. She couldn't get another job in the same field because her name was tarnished. And in the height of irony, Maxwell started dating Veronica's younger sister like 3 months after all this. Yeah, you read that right. Her younger sister, like 2 years younger than her. Apparently, Maxwell had met the sister at some family event before the whole Maldives disaster, and they'd kept in touch. When Veronica found out, according to Andrea, she had a complete breakdown. Her entire elaborate 2-year plan, all the stolen money, all the manipulation, and she ended up without me, without Maxwell, without a job, and with her sister dating the guy she'd destroyed her life for. The last time I heard from Veronica was like 6 months ago, and she showed up at my new apartment. I don't know how she got the address, probably through someone we knew in common. She rang the doorbell on a Saturday morning, and when I opened the door, she looked even worse than last time. She asked me for money. She said she had a credit card debt of almost $30,000 from the whole Maldives disaster and had no way to pay it, that collectors were harassing her, that she was going to lose her apartment. I told her it wasn't my problem, and she needed to leave. She saw Mackenzie, my new girlfriend, coming out of the kitchen with coffee, and I think she finally understood she'd completely lost. She left without saying anything else. Mackenzie and I have been dating for like 8 months now. I met her at a work networking event. She's a data analyst, smart, funny, and most importantly, genuine. Our relationship is completely different from what I had with Veronica. It's light, honest. There's no drama or secrets or manipulation. I told her the whole Veronica story on our 3rd date because I felt she needed to know what she was getting into, and her response was, "Thanks for your honesty. That sounds horrible, but you clearly came out of it stronger." And she was right. I came out stronger, but also more careful, more aware of warning signs, more protective of my heart and my money. Andrea and I are still friends. She apologized, like 1,000 times, for her role in everything. And although at first I was angry with her, I eventually understood that Veronica had manipulated her too. Andrea told me that Veronica tried to reconnect with her after everything, but she completely blocked her. That she realized their friendship had been toxic for years and she needed to get away. The last update Andrea gave me about Veronica was that she'd moved to another city, trying to start over where nobody knew her story. I look back at those 2 years and it's surreal to think it was all fake. Every anniversary we celebrated, every time she told me she loved me, every future plan we made, it was all part of an elaborate performance to make her ex jealous. And the craziest thing is her plan almost worked perfectly. If I hadn't been quick enough in cutting off the money and services, she probably would have had her perfect romantic trip with Maxwell, would have come back, would have given me some made-up excuse, and I never would have. I've known the complete truth. I would have continued being the idiot wondering what I did wrong. I guess I should be more bitter or angry, but honestly, I just feel relief. Relief that I discovered who she really was before marrying her or having kids with her or getting more deeply involved in my life. $20,000 is a lot of money. Yes, and it still hurts to think about all that wasted effort, but it could have been worse. I could have lost much more than money. Andrea told me once that Veronica had casually mentioned she wanted to get married before turning 26, That would have been in like 6 months if she hadn't disappeared when she did. Imagine if I'd proposed marriage without knowing all this. I dodged a huge bullet, basically. What bothers me most isn't so much the money, or even the betrayal, but the time. 2 years of my life that I dedicated to building something that was never real. 2 years where I could have been meeting someone genuine, working on myself, traveling, alone, whatever. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it. And what I learned is that people are capable of maintaining incredibly convincing masks when it suits them. That genuine love doesn't require games or manipulation or elaborate lies, and that trusting your instinct is important even when everything seems perfect on the surface. Mackenzie knows the whole story, and sometimes, when we're lying down at night, she asks me if I still think about Veronica or if I worry that something similar could happen again. I tell her the truth. That yes, I think about it occasionally, not because I miss her, but because it was such a surreal experience that it's hard to process completely. But that I don't live in constant fear of being cheated on again. I've learned to recognize the signs, to maintain healthy boundaries, to not lose my identity in a relationship. And Mackenzie is so different from Veronica in all aspects that it's hard to even compare them. With Mackenzie, there are no secrets, no hidden social media accounts, no stories that don't add up. It's refreshing. Honestly. Andrea sent me a message last week saying she saw Veronica on Instagram for the first time in months, that she'd posted something about new beginnings and second chances, but that in the comments several people were calling her out for her past behavior. She asked me if I wanted to see the post. I told her no. That chapter of my life is closed and I have no interest in reliving it even through social media. Veronica made her choices, paid the consequences, and now she has to live with that. I have my own life now. One that's genuine and honest and much better than it ever was with her. If there's anything positive I got from this whole experience, it's that I now know exactly what I don't want in a partner and what I won't tolerate ever again. I know the value of radical honesty, of open communication, of respecting each other's money and time, and I know that when something feels wrong, even though everything seems perfect on the surface, there's probably a reason for that discomfort. I should have paid more attention to those little weird signs I noticed, to the phone always face down, to the last-minute cancellations, to the way Veronica kept bringing up Maxwell in conversations when supposedly she'd gotten over him, but I learned and grew, and now I'm in a much better place. I recently finally recovered some of the money Veronica owed me. Not all, obviously, but her family felt so ashamed of what she did that they contacted me and offered to pay at least part as a form of compensation. I accepted not because I desperately needed the money, but because I felt it was appropriate closure, an acknowledgement that what she did was wrong and had real consequences. I used that money to take Mackenzie on a trip to Japan, something we'd both wanted to do. It was ironic in a way, using money recovered from a fake trip to finance a real trip with someone genuine. Mackenzie doesn't know the money came from there. I just told her I'd received a bonus at work, and that's okay. That trip was incredible. Completely different from what the fake Europe trip with Veronica would have been. Full of real moments and genuine happiness. So yeah, my girlfriend of 2 years stole almost $20,000 from me, disappeared to the Maldives with her ex, and used me as a pawn in her elaborate game to get that ex back with her. But in the end, she lost everything, and I gained an invaluable lesson and a much better life without her. I guess revenge is sweet when it's served in the form of natural consequences and a better future.